My fellow Weebs, I have a very important message to tell you. Uh, this game is pretty good. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Mark from Solo Games, and today we're not talking about Magic at all, except that last sentence. We're going to talk about Grand Archive. So, at this point, I'm not ready to do a full review on the game yet because it's just too fresh and there's a lot of things to consider. But I can tell you right now, just from experiencing many different aspects of the game so far and all the other elements surrounding the game, so the meta things that I care about, like the finance and things like that, so far my experience has been pretty good. So what I'm going to give you today is not a full review. It's not super extensive like what I would normally want to do for that, but I do want to give you a primer, intro, initial thoughts, if you will, on what I think about this game. So the first thing I want to say is, dude, this game is sick as hell. This game is really cool. There's a lot of elements that I like about this game. First of all, let's talk gameplay. Super simple. As a Magic player, I really sometimes don't really want to pick up another game because I feel it could be challenging to learn, and I don't have the time to go invest into another game nowadays because all the other things I'm doing, like this YouTube channel. But man, this game is so easy to pick up. Honestly, I'm just, as somebody who's kind of like learning these things and whatever, this game is pretty easy. I think it's super translatable from Magic, and you can see that the creators built this game with a lot of the concepts and the good things that they took from Magic. So understandings like sorcery, instant speed, allies or creatures on the battlefield, those kind of things, the attack and defense where, their attack and defense kind of reset, or I guess defense resets at the end of the turn. Those kind of things are really good because it makes tracking so much easier. I mean, honestly, I think if there's any more hint that these guys basically copy their game in a lot of ways from Wizards of the Coast, their company's name is called Weebs of the Shore. So there you have it. But look, this game is really cool. Now, the game is easy to learn, especially if you know Magic. You don't have to invest a lot of time to go learn the game. A lot of the things just kind of make sense. As an example, the game operates in a counterclockwise fashion when you do your turn. So in the beginning of the turn, when you do kind of like your upkeep, it goes from like the center of the board to your materials deck, which is basically a more powerful equipment deck, and then goes into your mana resource area, and then you draw the card. And it kind of works in this circle, and it's really easy to remember, and that way you don't do anything out of turn. And then as far as like the game goes, there's no more understanding of haste, those kind of things. And everything kind of still taps the same way like Magic. So you have this concept of a creature, your champion, etc., is used or not used, or in the game they call it rested. The other thing that's really cool is there's this, if you like Commander, if you're a big fan of like this kind of like creature fantasy or your like class fantasy type of thing, then you're going to love this game too, because you get to build a champion. And the champion is kind of like what defines the rest of your deck. So really like Commander in the same way, except think about like a Commander that can evolve over time. Your Commander starts out kind of small, doesn't really do a lot, but as it levels up, it acquires new abilities, acquires new bonuses, acquires new elements, and opens and unlocks other cards in your hand and deck that you can now play that you were not able to play before. So for example, I'm playing mainly nowadays a Lorraine deck. Lorraine is kind of like the warrior, and she starts out, and this is up to you by the way, but my Lorraine starts with a wind class element and then levels up into basically Lorraine with normal class, and then up to the top level, which is a Crux class. Now, I assume in the future, as they develop this game more, they're going to give you other options for Lorraine's level up. Maybe, for example, instead of going into, a normal or a Crux or Lorraine, I can use a different element for that. Maybe it becomes fire or some other advanced element. But as far as I can tell, there's basic elements and there's advanced elements. And most heroes can use a basic element of your choosing. So wind, water, fire. I think that's it. Maybe there's like earth or something else. There's another element there. And then, of course, there's possibility for new elements in the future. And then on the advanced class elements, there's like, so far I've seen is Crux, Arcane, Luxiderm. I'm not sure if there's like another one for the Tamer. The Tamer must have a new one as well. So there's a lot of options there for you to build. Now, this is where we get into the whole understanding of the game. The game at first glance is really class-based and it feels like it would be limiting because certain cards just wouldn't play. Well, it actually is a lot more open. So the mana system, for example, is super open because every card in your hand can be used as mana to pay for any other card in your hand. In addition, cards that you use as mana can be used again, essentially, to permanently pay for a card from a materials deck. Your mana can be banished, and when you do that, then you get more powerful effects out of it. But otherwise, at the end of the turn, or at the beginning of the next turn, your mana that you spent last turn just gets picked up and can be reused again for any other card inside your hand. In fact, those cards are also cards. So maybe, for example, turn 1, there are some cards you don't want to play or cannot play. You can use them for mana or temporary mana. And then turn 2, you might be playing those cards and using some other cards to pay for it. And that gives you a lot of flexibility there too. One thing that's really open too about the class fantasy is that while I play a warrior class, there's a lot of creatures and spells and abilities, attacks, etc. that are of course warrior class, and they would help me more if I was playing a warrior. But there are other things that you can play that are not warrior class, and that is also available and it's legal. So as an example, as a warrior, I can also play a mage spell if it benefits me. I can play guardian abilities or guardian allies. I may be able to even play tamer allies if I really want to. A third thing I found today, so I actually just finished building my deck, and I found this process, it took me about 2 hours really rebuilding my whole deck from the ground up, really refreshing. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times, because I've played a game called Shadow Era, I probably will mention it, if you know what Shadow Era is, the card game, then please let me know in the comments. I'd be so surprised if even a single one of my viewers ever played Shadow Era. But there's that. I really like Shadow Era personally. And part of the reason is because I love the class fantasy. I could play like, Nishivan or like, what are the like other, like Gravebone, I think, Graveborn. The different like characters and their different classes. For example, you play a dark warrior, you might play a necromancer mage, those kind of things. And that's really cool. The problem with that game is that it really limits the cards that you can even put in your deck. Especially in the first set, I remember, you had very little options to put creatures or cards inside your deck because they had to be mage spell or they had to be like a dark ally. So allies was split by dark and light, meaning like two sides of the battle. And then most cards that had classes would have a class on top. So for example, if you're a mage, you can't really use a warrior weapon. You can't use warrior spells. It didn't work like that. In this game, there's a lot of flexibility there. All you have to do is have a champion in your lineage. Lineage is basically from starting at level 0, leveling up to whatever level you get to with your champion. Have that element. For example, my Lorraine starts at level 0 as a wind element, and then she can level up to level 3 and gain the crux element. So then my Lorraine can play normal, which is available to every champion, wind, and crux cards, right? So that's where it gets a little kind of open. Now, the thing that's really unique about this game is, while crux, so far as I can see, is locked to Lorraine, the element in the beginning is a spirit, and that spirit can be anyone. So for example, you can play a fire Lorraine or a wind Lorraine, and technically probably you can play a water Lorraine, and maybe even like whatever other elements they introduce in the future Lorraine. And that drastically changes how your deck actually performs. For example, wind cards usually care to do combos. They usually care to go faster. They're lower cost, and they're not as devastating as attacks, but they do maybe multiple attacks per turn. So that's what wind Lorraine would do. But if you play a fire Lorraine, you can actually build a Lorraine, same warrior as before, a Lorraine that's more devastating on attacks. Imagine making these ridiculous swings for like 7-8 damage. So you're building like a brute warrior versus like a fencing warrior, or like a duelist, if you will, right? So if you think of class fantasy, this is where it gets really interesting to me, right? Maybe I want a Juggernaut Lorraine where she like one hit KO somebody, or maybe I want a Lorraine that can hit 17 times in a turn, right? This is kind of like the differentiation you want to make with your deck building. And then on top of that, you can then look at like different ways to customize your top end. So when I was building Lorraine, I realized very quickly that with all the crux card, even in the base set, there was 2 directions they were going into. And one direction was very focused on like, hey, get the weapon out, get the most powerful weapon out, banish everything else, and then so your most powerful weapon can swing for like 9 damage each turn. right? Because it counts for how many, the weapon is really strong, plus Lorraine cares about how many cards you have in banishment. So that's one strategy. There's another strategy where you get all the weapons out, but you don't use them. And it's because you want to do a thing where you can toss all the weapons together into the banishment and then do a ton of damage. And that on top of that will also add more damage because, again, Lorraine cares about having the weapons in the banishment. So there's ways to play Lorraine that I'm now realizing that I did not know even, I think, last week when I was playing this game with my friends. So that's the really cool part about this game. Now, let's move on to so that's all about gameplay, which I already fully enjoy. I think it's very unique and it's refreshing, it's different. And there's no mana screw. So it's kind of nice, right? Not having a bad starting hand. Now let's move on to the actual cards and those kind of things. Card quality is amazing. So first of all, they're using very thick cardstock. The cards are very smooth. If you know Magic, think more like Japanese printed cards, very nice cardstock, smooth. But every card, and this is really cool, every card on the back of the card is actually textured. So it has the logo, of course, of the game on the back, and each one of those is textured. And that's really nice. It has a nice feel to it. It just makes it feel really high quality. On top of that, the print quality is really good. I mean, the centering is nice, everything like that. I don't know, these are made in Taiwan, so maybe there's a factory or printer in Taiwan that's really doing good work, and we need to have Wizard do those printing at that factory too, because whatever they're churning out, I like. Moving on to collectability. So this company, they thought about this collectability element from the beginning. So of course, coming out of the gate, they already have serialized cards, they have collector's rare, etc., all sorts of different frames, different things. But the most important thing is two things. Number one, you don't have to have the collector's version. All the collector's version gives you is a cooler looking or specialized looking version of a card that's very common. So for example, they're going to give you your collector rares for the heroes or for the space champions, which are the spirits basically, level 0, which every deck is going to start out with. So on turn 1, you drop it. Think of this as a very specialized or rare, unique island or land, like basic land, right? Imagine you have a deck of serialized basic lands. That's kind of how this feels. And it's really nice because the whole point of collectability is that it's rare. It really doesn't have to be the most hyped card. And in a lot of ways, I think Magic is already doing this. You see a lot of players really spending a lot of money to deck out their lands, to really make really awesome looking lands. And the reason is because you're going to be playing lands most of the time. Those top end drops, it's a Shieldra or whatever, you may use them, but they're more top end. You may have games that never see that card, but land, you're going to be playing that every single time. Similar idea here. In Grand Archive, their focus of serialized collectability cards, collectible cards with signatures, all sorts of cool stuff, is that they drop them on cards that every deck is probably going to be playing, and you're going to be seeing them a lot. So it's really nice to have those kind of things. And imagine your champion being the one that's collected rare really puts a nice finishing touch on your deck, because people are going to see that card and they're going to say, wow, that's a super special, rare looking deck, right? And every other player can have access to the card. There's no limitation because it's a super rare card. No one has access to it. The second element that I really like so far is the fact that all of these collector's rares and collector's whatever versions, the most rare versions can only be acquired by winning tournaments. And this is really refreshing, honestly. I hate the fact that a game pushes you to go buy more products, to go open the super rare cards. Instead, to say, hey, guess what? Be a better player at the game. With normal looking cards, no collector's rare needed, and you'll win these super crazy looking cards. And these are the more rare cards, if you will, collector's rare wise, versus even the ones that you can open a box, even though those are fairly rare already. And then lastly, on the whole collectability side of thing, I really like the fact that this company is out of the gate releasing print run numbers. They're not going to hold back. They're just going to tell you exactly what they're going to print. Of course, plus or minus 10%. You kind of have an idea. Is it 10,000, 12,000, etc.? So for example, for the first set, right, Grand Archive printed, I believe, for the first edition boxes, about 12K boxes total. Now, plus another 10% slack for, your errors and returns and, replacement type of things. So they have that much in circulation. Now, Do the owners have a little bit more cards as well on the side? Who knows? Maybe. And I hope they do, because again, it's an awesome game and they should reward themselves for it. But I hope it's not like anything crazy. And I hope it's also part of that 12K print run, meaning they're holding back, let's say 1K in their own inventory, but still 12K out there in the field, right? And that's the thing that's really refreshing about this game. They really want to show those numbers out to the people and just give confidence to the market that, hey, like, this is what it is. Now, to combat the fact that there's a limited print run, that limitation is only on the base set, so on the first edition versions, right? But if it's beyond that, onto what they call altered edition, imagine that's unlimited or your print to demand kind of runs, there is still a limit on those runs, but those runs are a lot bigger than the first editions. And to reward the people for buying first editions, they are putting the collector's rares only in first editions, and the altered editions actually have some slightly different artwork, etc. So there's a lot of cool things that they're doing in the collectability area that I approve. I highly think that they are diversifying and they're learning a lot of the lessons from Flesh and Blood and Magic to then put into their game and say, hey, we need collectability, but at the same time, we cannot do that at a detriment to the players. And so I really appreciate that part of this game. Overall, I just think Grand Archives is refreshing. I think my only downside currently is that this game is very focused on anime art, which, if you love anime, if you're a weeb, right, then awesome. You're going to love this game. You're going to love the artwork. It's great. But if you feel like anime is really not your thing, and I have a lot of friends who don't like anime, I feel like it really ostracizes those players. And maybe that's not necessarily a good thing long-term for this company. And so really think about, I don't know what to do about that, because I think Grand Archive has its own theme, and of course it's going to have its own players. And look, Weiss is a card game that people play because, again, the anime element of it is really interesting for the people who play that game and collect, I guess. I think in a similar way, it's going to be polarizing for the fact that it's anime art focus or anime focus for this game. And that art style does, attract certain players and then detract other players. That's number one. Number two, personally, I have a problem with the company's name. I hope in the future they really consider changing their name to something else. I think if you really want to have a serious card game that's taken seriously by the audience, by everyone, don't make a joke name that is a joke, obvious joke of a different company, a different, very large trading card game company, right? I think it would be really cool if they have their own name, and I think I would appreciate that much more than Weebs of the Shore. Just my personal opinion. Again, obviously they're free to do whatever they want to do, but there's that. Other than that, so far, I love the game. I think the card quality is great. I think the fact that they're limiting these print runs really gives me, as a collector, something to kind of sit on and say, hey, you know what, I feel comfortable holding boxes or holding cards. At the same time, that does not detriment any of the players out there, because they can buy altered editions, which are much cheaper and much more available. So again, balancing the two markets. Now, long term, who knows, right? Because any card game, this is how it works. They can't print sets forever. So if there's cards in this set that are kind of powerful, useful, let's say this game lasts 5, 10, 20 years down the line, yes, absolutely. Even the altered edition probably going to be worth a lot of money. But in the interim, the fact that there's going to be first editions, and those first editions can just kind of hold money or whatever value on their own and still can be playable. There's a drafting format there too. While the altered editions serve as a way to feed more cards into the format, that's really great. And honestly, deck building for this game is really fun too. So there's a lot of things to look forward with that as well. I think that's going to do it for me. It's a little bit more messy than what I would want for a review, but that's why this is the initial thoughts type of thing on Grand Archive. Look, here's the thing. I'm not telling you that this is going to blow up, whatever. I simply think this game is actually really fun. I think this game is really well built. I think the game is really fun. And I do think the creators are taking the game element of this pretty seriously. And they've built a game that feels balanced, that feels really, nice. And it has nice epic turns that I think, you can make your deck go off. And that's kind of nice. That's the whole idea of that class fantasy. So there's that. I hope you guys all go out there and try it. You have a lot of options for what to purchase. And actually, I think coming this month, there's going to be a lot more options available, because as the altered edition comes to market, you're going to be able to purchase those and get yourself cracking. There's a lot of starter decks you can probably purchase now. They're not expensive at all. They're maybe $10 to $15 on eBay I've seen for each one of those decks, maybe even less if you buy up in bulk. Go out there, try this game. Highly recommend it. I think this game is awesome. I think if you want to spend money on a game and just have a lot of fun, but also feel like your cards are worth something for the long run, probably buy the first edition and build some decks. This game is really fun. Mark Solo Games. I'll see you next time. Stay classy.